I took on the challenge of building one build for each of the 3 different forms that the Storm Herald Barbarian takes. The first video was the Desert Barbarian. This one is going to be the Sea Storm Barbarian. Let's jump into it. Let's start off with the concept. We're going to be a dragonborn, and whenever I am a dragonborn, I like to think of myself as a mini dragon. What I wanted to do with this build is to be a sea storm. After all, we are embodying a sea storm. It only makes sense. And I think a dragon who's embodying a sea storm is also really dope. So I wanted to do the same thing. How I'm going to do that is I'm going to do a combination of cold damage and lightning damage and mix them together. Cold representing the freezing sea waves that we're slamming our enemies with, and of course lightning being the storm above. Moving into the lineage, I kind of already gave it away. We're going to be a dragonborn, but we're specifically going to be a silver metallic dragonborn from Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. Why? Well, the first reason is that it's going to give us cold resistance. Now, by being a Storm Herald Barbarian of the sea variety, we're eventually going to get lightning resistance, so now we're going to have cold and lightning resistance, that balance that we're striving for with this build. But more importantly, we're also going to get 2 new breath weapon attacks. Not only are we going to have a sea-based breath weapon attack that does cold damage, we're also going to have Enervation Breath, which is basically a stun, and how I'm going to flavor that is with electricity. We send out a pulse of electricity that stuns our enemies in front of us. Or we can have Repulsion Breath, which is going to send out a wave, a breath wave of seawater, and it's going to knock all of our enemies away and knock them prone. That's how I'm going to flavor those 2 different kinds of breath weapon attacks. Of course, we're not getting those until level 5, but that's why we are here in this lineage. As for our stats, we're going to go Constitution primary, unusual, Strength secondary, and Dex tertiary, with Wisdom with any remainder. We want to make sure we have at least 14 Dex to make sure our medium armor is as good as possible. As for our leveling structure, we're going to be going all 20 levels into Storm Herald Barbarian. Now let's jump into the key ideas, beginning at our early levels. By being a Sea Storm Herald Barbarian, we get a bonus action attack. It's always going to do a little bit of damage, even if they save against it, and if they save, it's going to do a full d6 of damage. That's not a lot of damage, and when you compare it to something like 2-weapon fighting or Polearm Masters, it really doesn't stand up to it. So it really kind of forced me to take a playstyle that would appreciate a bonus action attack no matter how bad it is. And that led me to the Sword and Board. Sword and Board is great at just doing its attacks and having more defenses, but it really doesn't do anything with its bonus action. Now we can continually use our bonus action for that just little bit of extra damage. The sword I would choose is going to be a cutlass, because it's just going to be a reflavored longsword, because it gives us that pirate vibe. Now at level 4, we're going to be scaling our constitution. Scaling our constitution with this build is actually a pretty big deal. It's going to give us more HP on top of the person who normally has the most HP. It's going to give us more AC, as well as increase our DC for both our bonus action electricity damage as well as our breath weapon attacks. So this creates a different dynamic with this barbarian than normal. Most barbarians just pick up a big ass weapon and they start charging recklessly and attacking. That's great, it does a ton of damage, but in return you're always getting hit. You can't be a very defensive build. This build has several reasons to not use reckless attack. Beginning with, some turns we're going to want to be using a breath weapon attack, so we're not even getting the benefits of reckless attack with that 1 breath weapon attack, so we probably won't reckless that turn. And when we don't reckless, we're going to have more AC than normal because we've invested into constitution. We're going to have more HP than normal, and we have a shield, so we are tankier than most barbarians are. Yes, we're sacrificing overall damage output, but we've kind of buffered that sacrifice by having a bonus action lightning attack, so we can really lean into this extremely tanky build. Speaking of our breath weapon attacks, now not only are we tanky as all get out, we do decent single target damage, but we also now have AoE blast to mix in, so we become kind of a minor blaster. Now that's how we're going to play our early levels, but let's move into those mid levels. It really begins at level 5. We get our extra attack, we get extra movement speed, things barbarians love, but we're also going to get our new breath weapon attacks by being a metallic dragonborn. Enervation Breath, as well as our Repulsion Breath. Enervation Breath is a staple. It is basically stunning strike at it as an AoE blast. Fantastic. But we can also do Repulsion Breath, which is great for knocking people away, knocking them prone, creating control, or knocking them into dangerous terrain. Awesome. Again, I'm flavoring this as waves to knock them around and lightning to stun them, just keeping that embodiment of the storm going. At level 6, we're going to get the ability to breathe underwater and gain a swimming speed. We're also going to get resistance to lightning damage, so now we have resistance to cold and lightning damage. But what I really love about this feature is there are dragons who are ambush predators who pop pop up from the sea, eat someone, and go under the ocean once again. And I really love that visual, and I think the dragons that do ambushes from the water are super dope, and I wanted to get that with this build. So what I'm going to do to really showcase that is, one, I'm going to take proficiency in stealth. And now normally we're just going to want the medium armor that gives us the most AC. We don't really care about stealth as a barbarian. With this build, because we're investing in constitution, we're going to be able to go get similar ACs but with unarmored defense, and so that will allow us to not have disadvantage on our stealth rolls while maintaining a similar AC. So now we can come up from underwater and jump out. But what are we going to do once we jump out? We're going to take proficiency in athletics so we can grapple someone and pull them under the water with us, where we can breathe and have full movement and they don't. That's pretty cool. Don't know how often it's going to come up in a campaign, but I wanted to showcase it here. Now this is the core of the build, but we can talk about some nuances that happen a bit later. At level 14, we're going to get Raging Storm. Now for the Sea Barbarian, Raging Storm allows us to use our reaction when we're attacking to attempt to knock them prone. So basically once per turn we can do a trip attack from a Battle Master without a resource tied to it. This is another reason not to commit to Reckless Attack, because once we hit them, they fall to the ground. Now we have advantage on our second attack. Or we might take that turn to grapple them now that they're on their back and are prone. So it kind of gives us a further incentive not to reckless attack. Now I want to be clear here that there's going to be a lot of turns we are reckless attacking, but there's going to be several incentives throughout this build to not reckless attack, so our tankiness comes more into play. I think about it kind of similar to the Stance Dancer that I built, where we sometimes choose to be far more defensive and far more of a turtle, and sometimes we just want to let our offensive aggression out. As for our remaining ASIs, Constitution is still a great investment, so is Strength. It's going to be our damage output, of course, but we also might want to consider picking up Resilient Wisdom here to protect our wisdom save, because that is the big Achilles heel of late level barbarians. So what we've built here is we've taken a very underused subclass and probably the weakest of those three subclasses within the subclass out of Desert, Sea, and Tundra, and we've made a very unique build out of it. It's more focused on being tanky, control, blasting, and less focused on its just single target attacks. We still have those single targets attacks, and we're definitely still a melee bruiser. We don't have much in the way of range, but it is a unique take on what the barbarian normally does. And I want to give a shout out to one of our Patreons. This goes out to Jonathan S. Thank you so much for your support, my man. Really appreciate it. Now, Jonathan has access to this video way before everybody else and already has access to the Tundra Barbarian. So if you want early access to some of our videos, the series videos, then go ahead and check out our Patreon. And just know, you'll also be supporting the channel at the same time. But with that, my friends, I hope you have yourselves an incredible day, and I'll catch you on the next one. See you then.